But this whole notion that there's no record or it's not proven in the investigation into Anthony Shots, Kegan Kline, Tony Kline, and all that, it's absolutely false. It's really ubiquitous throughout. I mean, what I posted there in the community page about when Jerry Holman was deposed, he had a lot to say, and when David Vito was deposed, who was the primary lead investigator into Kegan Kline, he had the same things to say, and then those gentlemen then went out on the social media and repeated those same things. So that all being the fact that it is believed by them, or at least was up until they decided to frame Richard Allen, that Kegan Kline or Tony Kline, but definitely the Anthony Shots account had definitely caused the girls to be out on the trails that day. They repeat that many times over, so that the Anthony Shots account, the word I use is lured, okay, because you would be luring if you're using a bait that's not really you, like this photo of this young guy. That's a lure, that's a bait, it's a catfish. So I say they lured the girls out to the trail, but sorry, my phone's ringing and I thought I had it on. All right, it's muted. Whether they lured the girls out there, they were responsible for the girls being out there, or they were the reason the girls went out there, it all means the same thing. That if it had not been for the Anthony Shots account planning to meet them and setting up a meeting with them out there, those girls would have never went out there. So I think that's a fact, and it's well established in the record. Now, one thing that is perplexing about that, and even Gray Hughes says that in his interview of Jerry Holman, he says, well, if you're saying that, then how bizarre is it that this lone wolf killer just also happens to meet with them at that place and time to victimize them? Like, the odds are incredibly unbelievable. And that's my story too, is that it's absolutely impossible, astronomical odds, that two different predators would intersect these girls at the same time and place from two different directions. So I don't think at all that these girls were victimized by a random occurrence, like Richard Allen having a six-pack and then going out there wanting to hurt two girls in broad daylight. I think that it's very more reasonable to assume that whatever ended up being the cause of the victimization of these girls, it was strictly tied to the people that were behind luring them out there in the first place. And I think that's just common sense. Occam's razor.
Are you still there? You trailed off.
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, okay. I'm done. I mean, that's where I tie Kegan Kline in, through that Anthony Shots account, because he's the primary actor that law enforcement has revealed was behind that account.
Right. Now, I happen to see, is it True Crime Design, the blonde woman who had an interview with Jerry Holman and put it up on YouTube in recent years? She had this interview with him, and he says, yeah, we were looking into the Kegan Kline thing, but we just couldn't get the evidence to place him out there that day. But we were looking into whether or not he was contacting Libby and luring them out there. And there's two instances in my mind of stuff that I've read where they fumbled the ball. The prosecution fumbled the ball. One, it's admitted in the murder sheet book, Shadow on the Bridge, that Kegan Kline hid some iPhone, like the primary phone he was using. He hid it, and when they raided the house, it was not captured, and he had opportunity to uninstall apps, Snapchat, whatever he was using, delete messages, delete evidence, wipe it, reinstall it, and then turn the phone in. And then the second instance of them fumbling is, I think it's in 2021, the FBI, the ERT division goes to was supposed to collect security footage from the Marathon gas station in Delphi. And so they retrieved the security system footage, and then they failed to capture it and put it on their own devices and secure the data. So they had it 30, 60, 90 days, and then they returned it back. And then it turns out, another instance of whoops, crucial evidence went missing, kind of like the 70 days of interviews and investigatory materials that went poof in 2017. They lost this, and then Murder Sheets claims this is the reason that Doug Carter kicked the FBI out. He got pissed. The FBI tried to blame it on the state police, and so Carter gets pissed and finally kicks them off. So the Kegan Kline fumbling thing is that's very apparent to me based on everything I read. And I gotta say, the other idea of who lured them out there, this BH individual, I find it hard to believe that he would have done that if he knew his son was sweet on one of those girls. That's a very tough pill to swallow if that is the
well, where's the evidence for that? Where's the evidence for Brad Holder luring the girls out there?
Right. Well, the story the theory goes that there is a phantom cell phone that they allege that Abby had, which, that seems difficult to establish from what I hear.
And that's more credible than the Unified Command saying they absolutely know that Kegan Kline and Anthony Schatz did communicate with the girls leading up to and including that morning and were responsible for the girls being out there. I mean,
right.
I'm just looking for the logic in making a far reach versus like tangible evidence in the palm of your hand. So backtracking, let's go in reverse. So FBI allegedly in some sort of problem with this marathon footage is very strange because they denied it wholeheartedly. They came out and issued a denial and said that no, they did not destroy this. And it's interesting because all of that revolved around Brad Rozzi's brother, which is a very bizarre nexus in this.
Yep.
How is it that Brad Rozzi's brother was the one that FBI was pointing the fingers at for destroying this evidence, and then Doug Carter allegedly getting so upset about it all that he wanted to have a pissing contest and then kick the FBI off the case with all of its incredible resources? So I don't know, considering the source coming from Murder Sheet, they are state narrative shill bootlicking narrative pushers and apologists. So they tend to present things from the bias that way. But yeah, I don't buy it. And I think that the goal always was to get the FBI out of their hair so that they could go ahead and proceed with the image or salvaging the image of the FBI, of the ISP, because I think that they had suffered such embarrassments and scrutiny was really coming down that I think Doug Carter's primary goal this entire time has solely been, rescuing the image of the ISP. He wants them to come across looking like everything sunshine and rainbows and looking like heroes. And so he's painted everything in that way, even at the risk of lying and misleading the public. And as you saw after the sentencing of Richard Allen, really just egregiously, patronizing the public and talking down to them and people who were questioning. So Doug Carter has really, I don't know, in my time, it's been embarrassing the way that I've lost confidence in him, but solely due to the constant, whitewashing and rescue attempts of all of this catastrophe. And then to go back to your first point, it was not True Crime Design, but I can't remember if this was Hannah Shakespeare or maybe Lauren Matthias, but one of those two were surely the ones who had spoken with him. And I can't recall, but I do remember Hannah Shakespeare some years ago having that conversation with Jerry Holman, and that's way back.
That's the little clip where she's wearing glasses and she's pressing Jerry Holman about why aren't you sharing more information with the family, and he's like struggling to answer and give a good answer, and then he sort of coughs halfway through to cover up his answer. Is that Hannah
That's got to be
Shakespeare?
Hannah Shakespeare. Is she sitting in his office?
Yeah, she's like sitting at a
Yeah.
table with him, and I've heard about this Hannah Shakespeare documentary. Did it get released? I've never seen it. I've just seen the little clips that I've come across on social media, and I assume that's her because I don't know the name to
Oh
the
yeah.
face.
Yeah.
So
I have a copy of that. I'll be posting it to share. Okay. So Hannah Shakespeare also produced the documentary recently that was made into a three-parter on Hulu called Capturing Their Killer or whatever it's called.
oh, she was behind
So
that one too. I have seen that.
yes, yes. Now she's okay. Hannah Shakespeare is an amazing journalist, storyteller in that way. And she had developed really close relationships with all parties involved. And, you got to understand in Delphi, that's a difficult task because, as you can see, there's a lot of passions, a lot of division, and emotions. And so, kudos to her for being able to somehow maintain relationships with everyone. But she got the story by doing that. And so that 2019 documentary is actually pretty incredible. If you go back and see it in its
Hello, Hidden
entirety.
Gems. We have
And also believe she did a good job with this Hulu one. Although this where we are now is so different than where things were in 2019 that it's hard to have a good feeling about anything, since Richard Allen's trial.
Yeah. I just looked it up. Hidden True Crime is the name of the channel. Lauren, and I'm sure everyone's
That's Lauren
seen this.
Matthias. Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. This interview with Jerry Holman where he talks about the Kegan Kline stuff. So forgive me, I said the wrong name earlier.
Oh, it's okay. It's okay. It's good to know. I need to go review that. I'm sort of reluctant to ever watch her material. I'm not a big fan of her.
Yeah,
but
now,
she, this group of producers who was behind this Hannah Shakespeare latest project for Hulu, one of the individuals who was in that group of producers is kind of odd because he was staying with Becky Patty and the Patty family at the same time co-producing this documentary and at the same time co-producing or with Lauren Matthias. So it's sort of a tangled web, if you start to really put all these characters together.
He stayed with them. He stayed in the Patty family residence. Ugh.
Yeah, he's like I said, it's a bunch of, you have such a strong feelings when you talk about the guilters versus the other side. And to see how these paths cross and you remember in Ghostbusters, Don't Cross the Streams. Yeah, these streams cross in Delphi, I tell you.
Right. Well, I get that, and I understand that. I understand people tensions flared, and people are never probably going to let any of the tension go, and I understand that. I can see why. Okay, so I thought it was ABC News that was behind capturing their killer, but apparently Hannah Shakespeare, you're telling me, was involved. Okay, good to know. Good to know. Another thing that struck me, speaking of Jerry Holman and the families and Hannah, insinuating that maybe it's time that you start releasing more information instead of holding all these cards close to your vest. I read in the Murder Sheet book that right before they were going to show the crime scene photos in the trial, this is 2024, is it October 2024? I know the conviction is November 2024, and I forget how long the trial went, but it's 2024, 7 years after the crime, 7 years plus. And they write in the murder sheet book, Shadow on the High Bridge, that the time finally comes where they're going to introduce the crime scene photos, and to avoid some, meltdown in the courtroom, or, the possibility of Richard Allen grinning and laughing and making a mockery of the whole thing, McClelland and the prosecution team finally decide, you know what? This is the time we need to show the families the crime scene photos. And I immediately stopped and I thought, wait. You're telling me the ISP, Unified Command, they never showed Mike Patty, Becky Patty, Carrie Timmons, Anna Williams. They never showed these people the crime scene photos all these years.
Bullshit.
That certainly cannot be true. But if they did,
yeah, bullshit.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, comment.
No, just this is Murder Sheet doing what they do. Murder Sheet will glaze up Nicholas McClelland and the state police to make them look like incredible, brilliant heroes. And to sort of emotionally inflame the audience. This is what they do with their whole pearl clutching, snarky type of approach. In other words, they'll approach some reporting like this. The detail you just added there, they didn't want to show the crime scene photos in full court and open court because of the risk of Richard Allen laughing. Really? Right, is that the take we're going to have?
So even on the
McClelland had no problem showing the autopsy photos and the most gruesome photos whatsoever in his closing, parlay, to re-traumatize the jury all over again at the end of trial. He's like, oh, might as well show the most gory, gruesome photos of these poor murdered girls that I can to upset the jury once again before I point at Rick Allen and say, yeah, remember he did it because we say so. They've exploited these images. This is really touchy subject for me because I feel like they exploited these images in every way possible, and this whole crime with these children for to use the emotional reaction or responses for the public from it. But then they want to seal the images to keep people from actually seeing for themselves that layout of the crime scene and how there's no explanation whatsoever that a guy like Richard Allen would ever do that. I mean, I've always recommended to the public, they seek out themselves, find those crime scene photos and look at them, because I think first impression, you look at those crime scene photos and you're instantly going to question whether or not Rick Allen could do that. It's so rare, the layout of that crime scene, that you look at that, it's like once in a lifetime thing that you'll see.
Right.
And so
I agree. I
find it odd that they've exploited these crime scene photos, but then don't want the public to see for themselves the reality of how those girls were left in the woods. It's trying to have both, trying to use them for what they can use them for, but also keep the public ignorant of the true nature of this crime.
What do you think? Were you paying attention to this case back when and I forget the year off the top of my head, but when the crime scene photos are leaked, what's your opinion on that whole thing? The official story is Mitchell Westerman, takes the photos. He's good friends with Andy Baldwin. He takes it from the office in the break room one day, doesn't tell Andy Baldwin, and somehow it winds up in his friend's hands, I guess, Robert Fortson, Kyle Fortson, and then this Mark Cohen guy. And Some people have expressed other opinions that it's not what it appears to be. What do you make of that? Was it as it appears, or was there more to the story with the crime scene photo leaks?
Absolutely not. It was a setup, in my opinion, and Baldwin was not cautious enough with the people who surrounded him, and so he was able to be almost every direction, not just Westerman. And there was money that changed hands. We know that. We know that there's an individual who was not investigated by Jerry Holman in the course of quote unquote investigating this. And I just find it suspicious that the guy is alleged to have sent the money just happens to be the one individual that Jerry Holman doesn't investigate. And you end up with the way the story's told now. It is solely to implicate the defense for being careless and choosing which friends they have, rather than to truly investigate every link in the chain and see what happened, why money was exchanged, and how things got from A to B, and what the ultimate plan was. We know there was a plan. We have evidence from this group of people describing that there was a plan, and that Brandon Woodhouse was involved in this plan. All the YouTubers were involved in this plan, and that there was some sort of goal for rolling out this plan. But it's funny because not a single individual tied up in all of that, meaning the ones named in all the documents, not a single one of them has ever come out and just told the truth about it. It's that bad. It's that damaging that even though we're years later now, truth still hasn't been told about all of that. And my suspicion is because there was illegal activity, and telling the truth might implicate people in crimes, which would lead to risk of prosecution and jail time. And I'm saying I want those photos out. So my whole thing is not, being aghast that the photos are out. I'm more upset by the fact that the truth can't be told about how this all went down. Like, I believe the goal initially was to have these gentlemen, and I mean Baldwin and Rozzi, the defense attorneys. I believe the ultimate goal initially was to have them found in contempt of court, so that if they could be set up with something like this, they could be found in contempt of court, which means they could then be arrested. And so my assumption would that a plan would go out like this to say, let's send in a mole, let's send in a bad actor, see if he can get in there, and we're going to give him instructions. When you get in there, get the absolute most worst thing that you can possibly get your hands on to leak from Discovery, and leak it, and therefore we'll be able to pursue contempt of court for these attorneys and get them in a big heap of trouble. And I think when he went in there, naturally, just take a step back and think, what's the worst possible thing that they could leak from Discovery? And that would be autopsy or crime scene photos of dead children. And so for the most part, it worked, except that in the contempt hearing, the state was caught with they were blindsided with a surprise witness and a surprise piece of evidence that was dropped onto the court's head. And even though she didn't allow it in, the cat had been let out of the bag. And I think therefore she decided it would be it would be suicide to, forgive the pun, but to go ahead and do that, to find them in contempt. So instead, she found that they were not found in contempt. But if you read that order, I might have mentioned this to you before, maybe not, but I'll send it to you, because if you read that order, it is the most egregious, ugly order that Judge Gull ever issued in this case. And she's done some ugly things. But this order is so hateful and vindictive. When you read it, you can tell that she's furious that she was not able to both keep her hands clean and her staff's hands clean and find contempt. So you can tell she's furious about that. So she basically finds that they're not to be found in contempt, but she goes ahead and defames them, accuses them of being negligent and just sloppy, and just she does all she can to really demean those attorneys in that order. And but luckily she didn't find them in contempt, so they didn't get cuffs, and they were not jailed.
Right. My sort of recollection of reading the account of this is that she is going to, and I don't know the legal word, forgive me, she's going to, I don't know, censure or spank them on the record, which everyone's going to find out about. And then instead of going through and taking a spanking on the record, they decide to withdraw from the case under duress, they argue. They think that's better than taking this punishment. And so this is where Bill Libretto and Scraman come in, right? They're going to be, Judge Gold picks them to replace Rosie and Baldwin, right?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because it's funny here. Now, this is a good point to highlight that we're actually talking about two separate events, and many people miss that. So what I was just referring to was the contempt hearing, which was the second attempt to have them removed. Okay, because essentially, in the incident you're describing, in the first event, she tried to force in chambers, force them to resign or remove themselves. And she did so. Well, in the interim, she appointed this Libretto and Scrimmin, two of her buddies, to come on and then take over the defense. And it's kind of odd because when they came in, they basically came out with the same conclusions as Baldwin and Rosie. You know, what are the odds of that unless there was something there? And even though there's that famous clip with Barbara McDonald where Libretto says, you know, it's scary that one girl was killed and one girl was sacrificed, you know? Well, anyhow, the Supreme Court of Indiana said, no, you can't do what you did. So then they overturned all of that. They gave Richard Allen back his counsel of choice. Libretto and Scrimmin kicked rocks. And then it was thereafter that McClellan, the prosecutor, decided, you know, I'm going to throw a tantrum about this. I'm not happy about this. So now let's file for contempt of court charges since you bullying them off the case didn't work. And the Supreme Court said no. So this old contempt hearing was a second trial. I mean, a second try. It was, you know, it was a second attempt to have them removed and jailed. But again, it failed because unbeknownst to Judge Gull at the time, there was evidence that existed that someone from in her office was leaking to podcasters and YouTubers. So it turned out to be just a total circus, but a lot of people missed all of those minutia, fine details in it because of the unusual nature, you know, where now you have these attorneys that they remember it was after the Franks. I think people have to understand we're new to this. So you had the Franks memorandum on September 18th or 19th. Remember? That's where it was first revealed to the public that there was this ritualistic element to not just the crime scene, but also to the investigation going back years. And for many, this was the first physical description of the crime scene coming from the court record. Now, I and others had heard intimate depictions of the crime scene for years from locals. And this being relayed, I would assume, by people who found the bodies, then telling others, and then, the game of telephone, so that when I got it, for instance, I was told that there were, so I had a local call me years ago and say, I'll describe the crime scene to you, Prof. And this local said, there was this, and this, and described it pretty accurately. Accuracy, this local told me, they said, and there were symbols carved on their bodies, satanic symbols carved on their bodies. So, for years, I thought that. And only now do I understand why that was said in that way. Because, yes, there were symbols that were strange on their bodies, but they were not carved onto the bodies. They were sticks placed on the bodies. But as I learned about runes and about the sort of the way that these symbols in sticks look like witchcraft symbols, sort of like the Blair Witch Project, I realized that, when these guys are doing runes who practice this Norse paganism, they call it carving the runes. So it's kind of interesting that a local came to me years ago before any of this court stuff started and told me that these symbols were satanic, which you could align with witchcraft, which you could align with Blair Witch, which you can then align with runes made with sticks. And then said, and they were carved on the bodies, where they were carved on the bodies, but not with the knife blade. They were carved in the terms of the way that Norse paganists would say they're carving runes. So don't you find that interesting?
Yeah, that's a little nuance I didn't pick up on, and I haven't heard anyone else describe it that way. That's interesting. One of the first things I came across when I was digging into this story were the Dave Erskine, the Erskine texts. I saw people talking about that, and of course I saw the screenshots that were passed around. I don't know if they were totally accurate, but that's one of the first big things I stumbled on doing a little Google searching.
Mm-hmm.
Let me switch gears with you. I wanted to ask you about Kelsey German. What do you make of Kelsey German? Is she just an airhead teenager that likes attention and likes telling tall tales? Did she tell the whole truth? Is she hiding something? A lot of people beat up Kelsey German in the comment sections that I've seen over recent months, and I just want to make sure that I fully comprehend it, because I didn't see it at first, but did she hold back, especially with Kegan Kline or this Anthony Schott stuff? Is there more that she knows that she never revealed?
Well, this is a huge abyss that I don't want to fall into, because these people are highly litigious and probably sue everybody that has a single opinion on Delphi. But you mentioned true crime design earlier, and I would defer to her for all commentary on Kelsey German. I mean, I think that it is highly suspicious that one would delete anything from any of Libby's accounts or phones. I mean, that is highly inappropriate, to say the least. I mean, you're dealing with now a brutal double homicide in which potentially critical evidence has been deleted by the sister, who had logins to all the social media accounts, which is another oddity. Why did she have all the logins? It just doesn't make sense. And then the Anthony Schott's account, and I think a huge problem that most people have with Kelsey's public statements and appearances has been the inconsistencies over the years. So is it that you got a stupid girl who's coming out and talking, not knowing what she's talking about? Or do you have a smart girl who's coming and trying to deceive the public? And then there's that other camp that says, well, maybe she was forced to do it. But I think she's caused the most scrutiny to come down on this family. And when people try to beat, people, it's extremely contentious out here, I guess, in this environment because people fiercely love to defend the families and not have the families questioned at all. And she's been one of the elements that has led to the most questions of the family. And I don't think you can blame people if family is coming out and being inconsistent with their statements, saying things that contradict other things they've said, and having a lot of bizarre behavior and suspicious looking statements and behavior. People are going to question that. And so I think she's caused a lot of problems. As far as the family being questioned and people not liking it, well, probably the primary reason for that is behavior and statements of Kelsey, who's caused a lot of that.
Okay, so I need to check out True Crime Design then. Okay. Yep, that's one of the things I kept seeing over and over, and it didn't totally click with me until later when I got a little bit more information. So, okay. So, update me on the latest happening here. Someone cut planks out of the Monon High Bridge. And I guess I'll just say, I guess it's BW that did this, I assume. I don't know who else would have done it or had opportunity to do it, but I saw you post it in the community section there, and I'm sorry, I didn't catch your stream episode where you went into detail with this, but a little odd. 10 years later, someone finally decides to chop it up to prevent people from going out there and trespassing onto his property, huh? Okay, so what do you make of Brad Weber?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I'm taking all of this from the locals who are saying it, But I mean, in the first place, that bridge is a historic landmark and is owned not by Brad Weber. It's not private property, and it's odd because if you go into the GIS system on Beacon or the county mapping, the assessor mapping system, you can clearly see that there's Weber's property does not at all touch that bridge. It's quite a ways. So if you're looking at where that bridge is and where Weber's lawn kind of starts being cut in the satellite imagery, you can see that entire span, even when you walk off the bridge on that side, you can walk for quite a ways and never touch Weber property. So he has no claim to that property. His K. Weber has purchased up a lot of the ground that surrounds the bridge. If you start clicking on all the parcels, they bought up a large portion of that. But the bridge proper and that area when you come off the bridge for many yards, it's not property of the Weber family. So for him, if it was indeed him who cut that, you're looking at multiple felonies. And I would assume probably for every plank cut, you might be looking at a different F5, F6 felony. And then you have the civil liabilities, because if this is a historic landmark and it's paid for by taxpayer dollars, and there's this whole other civil liability, I would assume this is a big deal. And the odd thing is we think it's been cut. We did a little inner research here in the family, so to speak, my group of sleuths. And we believe that going back to approximately October, November, December, sometime between the winter and now is when it's been cut. And as if I look at the photography and the videos, it looks like it already has some weathering to it. So I would assume that it had to be between October and March, generally, that was done. And if you think about it, if he's doing that in the dead of winter, or if someone went out there in the dead of winter, there's far less likelihood of anyone being out there. So I'm assuming that this took place in the dead of winter. I'm assuming the objective was exactly what was alleged, that it could have been Brad Weber or someone on his behalf who wanted to keep people from going over to that side. And I think it's odd because you think of fencing. Okay, there's fencing. Fencing is not very expensive for a person with the resources of Brad Weber. So why not go to your property line and erect some fencing and maybe some do not enter or trespass warning signs where your property line starts? Why do you feel it necessary to go and vandalize a historic bridge that, as I mentioned in my post, it's not only historic in terms of its age, but it's now become directly associated with these murders and the last moments of these girls' lives. So in some ways, for me, it has there's an element of reverence to it, because I look at it as you're destroying another part of this story. And if we're going to honor the girls by telling their story, now you've gone and you've brutalized or vandalized this key piece of these girls' story, and created a safety hazard. Because if you look at how bad that looks, someone falls into that hole, they're going to end up with stitches, broken bones, and who knows what else. Now, it's funny because I have so little faith in the locals. Do I think they'll ever prosecute this? No. I think what they're going to do is let it go. They'll probably go patch it up or something. But now you've got a huge liability. You've got damage to historic property, disrespect to the memory of the girls. And I'm pretty sure the law enforcement there will never do anything about it. They'll sweep it under the rug, forget it happened. They're never going to go do anything to Brad Weber. And they'll probably use it as a way to try to change some law or code out there to say, well, now we're going to make it illegal for anyone to step in there other than the designated path that we've paved over in the new portion of the bridge and the railing that we've erected. So that, like everything else, I'm just pretty negative on this. I think they'll use it for their benefit and to exclude people. And I think that's why it's gotten us upset. It's as if we've seen just constant sealing of documents, hiding of public information, destruction of property. I mentioned the CPS building and the Flora house, and there's not just the Flora house. The Flora evidence was destroyed. So it's just as the more time goes by, it's just been a continuous litany of destruction of evidence. This is just, I think this is the latest chapter.
Were there plans by someone to go out there on some expedition and take videos and photos? Did someone, I get the impression that this person you refer to got Weber all riled up, that someone had plans to go out there and maybe they got him all riled up over something. But for this to happen almost 10 years later, strikes me as odd, I guess, from a distance here.
Well, I think they certainly did. It was announced that they called him and upset him and all of this. And, he's known to be emotionally volatile, but I don't think that's what resulted in the cutting of the bridge. Because like I said, you go look at the cut portions, they show some aging. So to me, that aging, it probably occurred between the thaw and now, so in other words, how those, railroad ties, they basically have like a creosote coating or something that preserves the insides.
Okay.
So if you look at these photos or video closely, you can see that despite being, over 100 years old, the inner wood of those planks was highly preserved. It looks like new wood. But if you look really closely, you can see where there's algal growth or moss or it's some water stains, almost as if as the spring has progressed, those, you know, elements of aging has started to touch the clean wood from the inner cut. So I don't think Brad Weber just did it a day or two before these guys showed up. I think
Okay.
it was done during, because we know someone who was out there in the fall and who went out there and witnessed and filmed, and this was not there in the fall. That's how we know it somehow has occurred since, say, November, December till, maybe March or April. So sometime in this winter time period, it was definitely done. And it's had enough time to start showing some signs of aging on the fresh cut portions. Now, what this has done, though, it's made me rethink Brad Weber, because there's many things we know about Brad Weber. Like, we know that his bathroom was searched several times, or his house was his home, but they were particularly interested in his bathroom. We know he had a .40 caliber Sig Sauer, exactly the type of weapon they say Richard Allen used to eject this round.
Yeah, P226 model, huh?
Right. Is it 226? Okay. Yeah. So,
which didn't Melissa Oberg say it couldn't be excluded from the results, or she couldn't exclude it?
Could not be excluded. Right. Exactly. But you know what else they were looking for? And a lot of people miss this. You got to really read into the case, but their initial canvas, I guess, for firearms that could have produced these markings were either a Smith & Wesson .40 caliber or a Sig Sauer P226. So it's kind of odd, because as we've gone through all of these POIs, damn it, wouldn't you know that all of these POIs either owned a Smith & Wesson .40 or a Sig .40? So it's just odd, because there must have been something in the marks or in the tooling and the way that they had determined that they could whittle this down to just either a Smith & Wesson or a Sig. Now, since they decided to arrest Richard Allen, they zeroed in on the Sig. But I look at it as, if there was enough for them to determine and narrow it down to Smith & Wesson .40 or a Sig, there must be a reason that they included the Smith & Wesson .40, which, if you start looking back into POIs, it broadens the range, because now you're not just looking for someone that potentially had a Sig .40 caliber. You're looking for someone who had a Smith & Wesson .40. And I would assume it would be the M&P .40 is what they're talking about, because that's the most common Smith & Wesson .40 that I knew about that existed at that point in time. Anyhow, like what I was getting at, though, is Brad Weber's profile, where here you have a guy had the same firearm as the round they say they found between the bodies. It would match Allen's. They couldn't exclude any other, which means it's included. You have a guy that's very well known to approach people at gunpoint on his property. Well, if I start reverse engineering this, looking at it, it's like, okay, well, where did Abby and Libby supposedly get taken from and approached at gunpoint? Well, God damn it, it's on his property. So what are the odds that you got a guy that's highly emotional or prone to being easily inflamed by people being on his property? You got a guy that owns the same similar identical firearm to Richard Allen. Now you got a guy who there was a surveillance camera set up at that end of the bridge that, at least from the best we can tell, it appears as though there was a trail cam that was set up at the south end of the bridge to capture people coming off that end of the bridge. So I'm just hypothesizing here, speculating. Well, what if Brad Weber can see or get a notice that someone's come off the end of that bridge because of that trail cam. He flies out of the house with his firearm. He runs over and he sees it's 2 or 3 little girls, because we don't know if anyone's with Libby or Abby or not. The BG video we've been given seems to indicate there's someone else there. There's other voices, other shadows. So perhaps he encounters a few girls, 2 of whom are Abby and Libby. If he's known for putting the gun in people's faces and being irate with them because they're on his property, he's a big guy. He has access, easiest access to the property. He does. He's supposed to be driving home within the hour that these girls are taken. He has a van. I could almost see him stopping on the private drive, opening the van, taking the girls, throwing them in the back of the damn van. We don't know. If we think this crime is unsolved, any of these things are possibilities. But I announced on my community page, he's back on the damn POI list, because for years people had him on that POI list. And since we've been so preoccupied with Richard Allen, we stopped talking about all of these theories. But I look at it, you got this weird ass guy, right? Across the water, you got weird ass Ron Logan. You got weird ass Kegan and Tony Kline using Anthony Schott's account. You got several witnesses who are tied to the local gangs. You know how some of the people like to talk about gangs. So some of these girls who were out there that day, who half of them appeared as witnesses, half of them were hidden by the state. These girls are dating literal meth head gang members, dope dealers who have long histories of drug offenses in my cases. You got all these kind of people, Ron Logan, Kegan Kline, Tony Kline, Brad Weber. It's like the place is just surrounded by creepy guys.
Right.
So I think it's important to kind of, if you're going to say Rick Allen didn't do this, a lone wolf killer like Rick Allen didn't do it, then I guess to think of the environment. What is our environment like? Because, if we're at a park, we can develop a theory at a park. If a little girl's taken from a park, you're going to ask the same questions. Well, what would be the environment of that park? Who would have access? Or if a little girl's taken from some other place, you'll ask that question. So when I look at this particular location, I think of, what would this environment be? I don't know. A lot of guys had access easy. The closest, most immediate access to the point of abduction are these creepy guys, is my point.
Yeah, now that I've said this elsewhere, but that is one of the things that struck me digging into this story. How could it be that so many weirdos, criminals, perverts could be in and around that? You turn over every rock and there's some, degenerate criminal type, and even some of the early people that aren't necessarily talked about in documents, the James Brian Chadwells, Thomas Bruce's, the Paul Edders. I mean, that is one thing that Daniel Nations, that's one thing that stuck out to me, is like, holy smokes. How could it be that there's so many potential people that, vaguely fit a profile of being the real killer here? And this is in flyover small town, red state America. That is extremely, toss aside all the railroading of Richard Allen. Just the fact that there's so many of these people in small town America is extremely disturbing. And it's not that I'm shocked or surprised. It's just one of those little things you don't think about in your everyday day-to-day life until you're forced to look at it like this, and you're trying to figure out, well, what are the puzzle pieces? Where do they fit? And how closely do these names mentioned fit a profile like this? It was extremely disturbing going over that and coming to grips with it.
Yeah, I mean, and I always think back to how there's just an epidemic, or at least, it's changing now because times are changing. But at that period of time, there was a long-standing epidemic of meth manufacture and use in that area, in that region. And I think that that becomes sort of a pathway or a nexus to these people. Is a lot of these people, they're the type who would have experience in cooking meth, and you got to do that outdoors, and maybe cooking meth in the woods, and then maybe you're taking it because you have a large amount. When you cook up a batch, it's not just a little. Suddenly you have a lot, and so then you're able to bend yourself and your friends. And the rumors from day one with this crime was that it was a group of guys cooking meth out in the woods who were all blasted out of their minds. And as time passed on, that rumor has stuck. And even the parents of those children, felt that was the case. And I think even to this day, I would believe they still feel that that was the case. It's just they are maybe reluctant to speak out publicly, and also just sort of letting this, maybe they entered this thing with Richard Allen thinking that it would be the thread to pull on, and that maybe it would lead to the others involved. But I have a hard time believing the parents of these children don't have their reservations about this, and wonder if there's more, the right thing that was done with Richard Allen.
Right. That thought has certainly crossed my mind a couple times. Backing up to, I think, and I'm almost hesitant to talk about this because it's my understanding based on interviews I saw of Andy Baldwin that they don't want to get into him specifically because of what's coming down the road with what they presented at trial and how it doesn't line up, and it's not true. It's actually, false testimony, which there's a legal term for that. When someone presents false testimony in a trial, it's a big violation. So, but I'll say this: I'm not a huge True Crime Garage podcast listener, but I did read their book because I was able to get my hands on a copy of it. And so Nick Edwards, I believe, is the guy. And I think it's brothers that do the True Crime Garage podcast. But years ago, I did come across some speculation posted by them or their listeners that were on a social media page of True Crime Garage, where they posted these lookalike sort of images of blue jackets. And there was a claim, an allegation that one of the employee jackets for Subaru employees could very well resemble Bridge Guy's blue jacket. And now I doubt, for the reasons I just laid out, the timeline, I don't think he gets home until what, 2:45, 2:50, something like that. So I am totally down on the white van and the Monica Wallace stuff. And I think even Gray Hughes alluded to this in the past that, this is and Doug Carter, this is the big detail, the big secret that only the killer would know. The white van scared Richard Allen at 2:32, so he killed him and got out of there. Well, I doubt all that. I really do think he's not home until 2:50 or so. The other thing about Weber is that in that Robert Ives interview where he's sitting on the couch in someone's home and he's talking about the crime scene and the investigation back in 2017, he says there's a house that looks down right on the crime scene where the girls were found. And I believe that this is the Kay Weber property. And so that was another thing that sort of stuck out. Well, gee, did anyone bother to look out a window while a search was going on? Surely you would have seen a tie-dye shirt and possibly two pale bodies amidst dark leaves and woods in the middle of winter. But so those were the two things.
Especially when you had all day. You had from not only the day before, but even if you just count the 14th, you had from sunrise 7 whatever a.m. until allegedly noon. You had 3, 4, 5 hours to look down on that crime scene and see those glowing white bodies, and you didn't see a thing.
Right. It struck me as, hard to believe, but then again, I wasn't there. I don't know. So I don't want to go too far with my allegations here, but yeah, I've seen all the reports of holding people at gunpoint. I think a group of two girls maybe, and I know there's other people that have tried to go on the property to get access. They've even driven the long private access drive that is technically his driveway, um, and have got caught, got run out, got the cops called on them. I've seen all these stories reported on the internet and all the forums and chat rooms and stuff. Um, One other thing that's interesting, do you put any stock in the tweaker guy sketch? Teresa Liebert lives right at the end of that private access road, which is the Brad Weber long driveway, which hits whatever country road or back road that is, I forget. But her house sits right there, and there's a group of like 3 or 4 mailboxes, and she gave testimony or has sworn affidavits that her and her husband were leaving the morning of the 13th at, I don't know, 7:30, 8 o'clock, 8:30 a.m. And they see the tweaker guy sketch is a description she gave. Do you have any, do you care to comment? Do you think there's anything to the tweaker guy sketch?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's either Elvis Field, another person known in the community, for sure, and I think that it's indicative of the fact that they were there from the night before. If they were there the night before, it's entirely possible to see Elvis Fields or someone else who was involved in that gathering at 7 something a.m. wandering around, or I like to use the word malingering, malingering around the area, the property. I'm glad you brought that up because I was thinking of it as you were speaking.
Well,
And also back to that Subaru, the funny thing is, there's a bunch of people that were employed at Subaru who were known to be out there in those 48 hours, which is more food for thought.
Yeah. I think that James Bryan Chadwell worked there too at some time, maybe not in February of 2017, but I know he was reported to have been like staying out under or near some bridge out in the woods in a tent at one point, and it was alleged that he worked there. That caught my attention. But you know what? I had the exact same reaction to the tweaker guy sketch. I thought, based on the description, the high cheekbones, and someone who was like potentially toothless or tweaker type, if I would have passed him, I would get that impression. So I'm glad that thought crossed my mind. I was on the same page, and if you've been around this a long time and you know a lot, I'm glad that I sort of came to the same conclusion about tweaker guy sketch.
Well, and about the Subaru, the two employers, it's very strange because throughout this entire thing going on to 2017, you've always heard over and over again repetitively about two employers and a bunch of employees being out there from these two employers, and that's Subaru and the Packers. And the number of POIs from Subaru and the Packers is highly unusual. And people kind of forget, especially since Richard Allen has come along, lots of people have forgotten all of those early things and all the work that it took to get to that. But yeah, I don't know. I'm sure if you go digging, you're going to understand who I'm referring to regarding Subaru, and I think most people, it's very easy to know about Packers because a lot of these meth heads and youngsters worked at Packers.
Okay, so we talked a little bit. I mean, you mentioned Elvis Fields. There's the Rushville connection, and I know that you're definitely on the Reese Davis theory. So how do you feel about Todd Click, Greg Ferenczi, and Kevin Murphy? Is it they put together the Rushville connection, the Odinist connection to this crime? What do you make of that whole saga? It's my understanding that Click sort of had some sort of retaliation and got charges filed against him. Ferenczi was shot and killed point blank range by some deranged former prison guard, Shane Meehan, who also tossed Molotov cocktails at the building that Ferenczi was in at the time. This is like next level Hollywood movie type stuff. And I don't want to jump on anything too soon or say that it was definitely a hit on Ferenczi, but if it is, tell me, what am I to make of all this?
Well, and keep in mind that Ryan Lindgren was the other individual out there with Ferenczi who shot Meehan. Okay, and he ended up being over the Flora case or investigating the Flora case. You know, so there's that. You know, Ryan Lindgren was FBI.
That's not a name I'm familiar with, so I'm glad you're going here.
Okay.
Go ahead.
He was working with Ferenczi. He was the individual involved in a gunfight with Ferenczi and Meehan, where he came out to protect Ferenczi and ended up getting some shots in Meehan, which caused Meehan to get caught because he had to drive himself to the hospital to avoid from dying. And then he went on to start, he was then brought into the Flora investigation before he retired. And so, in a way, you could say, well, that's one of your links to Flora right there, where you got Ferenczi's partner ends up investigating Flora. You know? Now, with this, the question you asked had nothing to do with that. I just wanted to mention it since you mentioned that incident. But see, I think what you see, there's this tendency for people to be short-sighted, and so they'll say things like, "Well, hold on, if it's the Odinist, how is it Kegan Kline and Ron Logan?" And I think that's tunnel vision. I would tend to look at it the opposite way. I would say, well, hold on. What if Ferenczi, Click, and Murphy only found the tip of the iceberg? They found the thread that they could pull on with their resource, their investigation. You know, and
Right.
we discussed in my previous talk with you, I don't think this was an authentic ritual. Like for me, sorry, it don't work. It don't work. I don't think that we would find the crime scene to look the way it does with indecipherable runic elements if it was a true ritual. In other words, I would think these, okay, you can cut me out here, Ted, if you want, but I got to use the word. I think these motherfuckers would leave very identifiable signatures if they had sacrificed these goods. They would leave runes that would leave no doubt that they're actual legitimate runes that have specific, clear meaning. They wouldn't leave half-ass runes. And I think that's what we talked about in the last time we discussed this, is those runes are kind of half-assed that's left at the crime scene, which to me are more indicative of what Reese's story is. That this was an idea to throw off investigators by imitating or making it look like something Ron Logan wouldn't be involved in. So yeah, if they knew that Holder in that group and there were individuals that did that kind of stuff with those symbols, I could see them trying to point at that. Even Becky Patty did in the couple days after these girls were found, she was already pointing at Brad Holder. Now, I'm not saying that Brad Holder and those guys weren't involved. I just have a hard time limiting it or pigeonholing it into the Todd Click, Kevin Murphy, purely Odinist theory. I think that's ridiculous. I think if those guys were involved, they came in as a cleanup crew or the strong arms. You know, if Ron Logan and Kegan Kline's morbidly obese. Ron Logan's an old man. Libby's body's 200 pounds, dead weight. They got another girl. The place is crawling with cops. My My assumption would be if they're in a bind, if they have a way to get some help real quick, then you could possibly get one or two of the guys mentioned in the Frank's memorandum, which means Westfall might be innocent. Holder might be innocent, you know?
Right.
But I mean, I would have a hard time saying also Ned Smith, Rod Abrams. But I mean, Elvis Fields, the confessions he gave his sisters are far too specific. You know, whether it's the here's my blue jacket, can you hide this for me?
I agree.
I spit on the girls. The one of them was a troublemaker. Abby was a troublemaker. There were two girls on the bridge. I put horns on the girls, like our antlers, all those little fine details that over time he just blurted out to his sisters, and then they snitched reluctantly.
Yeah, before the bodies were found, right?
Before the bodies were found, and then you have that sketch which highly resembles Elvis Field. I'm not saying it is, but I mean, you got that sketch, you got all of that. Then you got the Rushville investigation, and you got the fact that he used to deliver pigs. You know, and I've said before, I think he was delivering pigs with Josh Chrisman. There had been rumors for years that there was a pig delivered. And the rumors had gotten so specific, they said there was a pig delivered to the old CPS building. So not only were there rumors for years that there was a hog roast and there was a party at the cemetery the night before, there was rumors that not only was there that, but a pig was delivered, a hog was delivered to be roasted, and it was delivered to the old CPS building. I mean, those are very specific rumors. And if we know that Elvis was exactly doing that as a side hustle, that could explain him being there. You know, in this delivery that we were supposed to make up to Abbeyland, oddly enough, they never got there till the next day. So they had lied about that whole thing. So who's to say that they didn't have some pigs to deliver? They stop off at this party, deliver one of the damn pigs. Two girls get murdered. They clean shit up, and they leave town and go make the delivery, the rest of the delivery they had to make. So for me, yeah, Elvis ain't off the table, and neither are the rest of those Frank's memo subjects until a new trial or a new investigation or FBI comes in and clears individuals. But I would admit to you that the behavior of some of them is sort of, it would be hard to believe that some of these guys would be that guilty of that kind of crime and then go out on podcasts and on documentaries and
Yes.
movies and shit.
Yes.
And be so open. So it's sort of like, I don't see the suspicious behavior that I would expect to see in some of them.
Right.
So
I was
I'm
going to say that about Westfall specifically. I saw 2 episodes he did with Sleuth Intuition. He was on the ABC documentary, the Girls on the High Bridge. And I just, you know, after seeing all that, and I thought, geez, if this guy's involved and he's out here, and he didn't strike me in the little segments as that he's trying to spin doctor and trying to massage his image. I didn't really get that impression at all. So I thought, man, if I had some part in this, if I was guilty of these murders, I would be running away from this and denying it and never, taking it to my grave. I'm not going to put my face on camera. So I agree with your initial reaction there. I had the same thing after reviewing some of that.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to be out here as an apologist for those guys either. I don't know, and I guess my point is none of us know. The people involved would know, but I mean, if I'm just looking at it sort of as objectively as I can, and I see, yeah, well, there are some, I think there are some indicators or evidence in the Frank's memorandum that is pretty interesting. But then some of it, I'm not so sure. And if you're trying to make that your whole bag, I just think it's limited, especially when you got, like I said before, The shit with Ron Logan and Reese was literally telling this and writing it down in the spring of 2017,
It's very
which
early.
is months after these murders. And then Kegan Kline, despite what anybody else fucking says, Kegan Kline has implicated his guilt and his father's guilt to a dozen people, not just Reese Davis. Kegan Kline has a sister. She's came out and talked to people behind the scenes. It's gotten to us.
Oh, interesting.
Kegan Kline had a lot of women who had his attention, or he had their attention. They had his attention, and he told these women similar things. He's gone on podcasts of different channels and said the same things. And yes, is he a liar? Yeah, because many of the times he changes some of the details. Shit, even Jerry Holman, David Vito attested to the fact that he confessed to this to them.
Yeah, very odd
And
thing to do.
their only comeback was to say, we just could not definitively place him there. So they'll admit, yes, he confessed to us. They also admitted that he was offered a plea deal. So let me think. He wanted immunity and had been offered immunity by Nick McClellan for the Delphi murders, for his role in the Delphi murders. Do you know that, Ted? Because many people don't know that. That detail has slipped them by. Why would Nick McClellan offer Kegan Kline immunity for the Delphi murders if he had no knowledge and nothing to do with it?
Yeah, that's extremely interesting.
So I think there's a lot with Kegan. There's a lot more evidence against Kegan than there is against some of the individuals that you would include in this Odinist thing if you use tunnel vision and only look at that and exclude everything else.
I agree. You know what? I was hot on the Odinist stuff because I read the defense team depositions and documents and included in all that, there were the conversations of Amber Holder, Brad's ex-wife or ex-girlfriend. There's Taylor Hardaway, I think that's her name, who was the former girlfriend of Johnny Messer. And they tell cops these stories, and you're reading it, and it's like, damn, this is very damning stuff that you're reading. And so it's like, wow, okay, I got to dig more. I got to find out more. And then you come across the Reese Davis, the interviews, these prison phone calls, and it's like, man, this, I know the big rule is you can't trust jailhouse informants because they'll tell you anything to get time whacked off their sentence. You know what I mean? But his story, I seemingly cannot get away from it. I keep coming back to it, and that's where I'm at with that. So I really hope that he is telling the truth, and I just can't. Again, we went over last time. I said there were 2, 3, 4 little things that I caught when he's telling you the story, and it's like, holy crap, like that makes a lot of sense. And there's little gems in the things that he says that catch your attention. So,
yeah, and he's also never asked for time off or money. Period. Although he is trying to pursue post-conviction relief to have time taken off of his unfair sentence, so that's a whole separate legal matter that does not involve, that's something an attorney's pursuing as part of the natural playing of the judicial process. That has nothing to do with him asking McClellan or anyone else for some sort of consideration. So that's been put out there to smear him. There's no evidence that he ever asked for that, whether it be money or time off. There's no documentation. There's the opposite, because when he goes and he says, well, look, go get that video recorded interview when I first spoke to Holman in 2017, you're going to see everything that was said. You're going to see what happened during this so-called polygraph. And what happens? No, they end up saying they've deleted it or they can't find the video, it's permanently gone, and there's no transcript. So all of a sudden, instead of evidence of what he asked for or what he said or what kind of consideration or time off he was asking for giving this information, instead of any of that, they've done the opposite. They've just destroyed it all, deleted it, so we can't even go and see. So I would say it's incumbent upon the accusers to say that he's asked for money or asked for any time off. Like that's, I've heard no one. I've talked to the women that he's spoken with, and no one attests that he's ever said that. That was a lie put out. One of the same individuals who's currently involved in this Brad Weber debacle, he came out some time ago and started spreading that rumor. And my assumption would be it's just to discredit the guy because you don't want to hear what he's saying.
I see. Well, he was punished for writing these letters and spilling the beans, wasn't he? Didn't he get time in the hole, solitary confinement? And
Ted, honestly, he's being punished right now.
Is he? Okay.
I just spoke with him 2 days ago. He's back there. He's in the hole again. He's told he's there permanently until he's transferred to another facility, and not allowed to communicate or have visits with his wife. They've taken all of his belongings, and they say we can only bring one box or two, so they destroy all of his other belongings, but don't let him choose what gets to be put in there. Well, luckily, the additional evidence about Kegan Kline and this whole thing with Ron Logan and Kegan Kline, luckily, that had already been passed off to the attorneys, or that shit would be destroyed right now. But yeah, poor Reese, he's a second round has come against him in the past couple weeks, and he's currently in the middle of it. But he's, Andrew Baldwin has been working diligently behind the scenes, and I'll be doing another talk with him to get the update so he can tell this part of the story. But yeah, it's been he said, Prof, it's exactly like it happened the first time. They just, out of the blue, they just came around and started acting nuts with me, and now I'm in segregation again. I'm like, well, all right. I mean, my opinion here is they know that we're ramping up towards this final playing out of the appeal. So I think that now that they know that, we're approaching the real heart of the appeal and the decision, and oral arguments, all of this, we're entering this time frame. I think they're preemptively shutting him up again.
I can see that. And I know that is a thing. I've read that in other cases. And I seem to recall, didn't he, wasn't part of his story that he like the warden or the head of the jail at Newcastle calls him in and is like, what did you do? I've got people coming all over here. You need to stop. I'm not mad at you, but you've stirred up a hornet's nest and done something. Wasn't that part of the detail of the story that he told?
Yeah, essentially you got some people real upset and pissed off, and I'm going to figure it out. You just need to cool out for now.
Well, that's why I titled the first one we did Punished, the Reese Davis story. I believe he has been punished, and it sounds like it's continuing, and I guess that doesn't totally surprise me. I did get sort of hit upside the head. Talked to a guest of mine who has been around the Delphi thing, Rick Snay. He hit me with he's confident. I don't know if he's wrong, and I know he's not the most popular guy. I get it. He is adamant that a new trial is incoming. So if that does play out that way, and there is a new trial, I could easily foresee monkey games being played with several people to prevent Richard Allen's counsel from utilizing them as witnesses in a new trial. So I hope Reese prevails and that everything goes okay for him.
Yeah, me too. And I'm not confident. I think that in totality, there's a very strong case. Now, will that mean that his appeal is successful and he gets a new trial or is remanded for a new trial? Or will it mean that they deny it and then it goes into post conviction relief, which will be successful? I'm less confident on either one of those, but I would say that should he not get a successful appeal happening, I'm certain his post conviction relief would be, because regardless, this guy's I mean, we were talking about Rick Allen. You know, his constitutional rights have been severely violated and trampled on. And I think that whether it's through an official appellate process where he gets a new trial, or if they just kind of send this to post conviction relief, either way he's going to be successful. I just don't see any other way. So it could be that post conviction relief is even a better outcome, because that might mean maybe no new trial. You know, I guess, and even the appeal doesn't have to mean a new trial. So I think that the best case scenario would be no new trial, just turn the shit over, let him walk out of there. But maybe worst case scenario, new trial.
Yeah,
But either
well,
way, I agree. I would agree in that way, is to say something's going to happen. But I think the odds are more strongly on post conviction relief than true appeal. But either way, the outcome's the same. And I think
okay.
that this is, you know, consulting with several attorneys who know the case, it's that bad. You know, I think that's the consensus with all the attorneys. It's that bad that it's obvious that there's going to be something, you know, successful here, or some pathway where they have to address this.
Well, good, good. I hope it turns out that way. I did a little digging on my own, and I understand it's a panel of 3 judges that they're going to argue oral arguments before, and it's 2 women and 1 male. And the male, his last name is Altice, from what I remember. And this guy has shown strength in defense of constitutional rights for individuals. So I was running this through an AI program, and just give me kind of a scouting report on these 3 judges. Are they going to protect the integrity of the Indiana judicial system, or are they going to lean more towards defending Richard Allen's rights? And so the little synopsis that I got is that this male judge, Altice, has shown some strength in the past. So maybe there is, I'm naturally a little bit pessimistic with this case in particular. So hopefully there's reason for optimism. Well, look, I've taken 90 minutes of your time here, Prof. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention that we didn't cover, or any closing thoughts you want to leave the audience with here?
No, not really. It was a good talk today, and we'll do more. So look out for more. I think Ted and I love the conversation, and I would assume that there'll be more.
I hope so. I
And
certainly
yeah,
hope
I
so. I
mean,
would
pray
love
for
to.
Reese. I guess just harkening back to what we were discussing just 5 minutes ago. Part is also health related, so he's in a health crisis due to improper care plus the solitaries. It's almost another slightly different type of version of the Westville treatment, where he's had medical neglect, and now they are throwing this medically neglected inmate into solitary again. So just pray for Reese, I would say.
Is there a way we can write to him? Can he get mail from the outside? Anything like that?
I'm pretty sure, but I really don't know where to guide you, but I'll work on it, and I'll have it for you to post under this video. How about that?
Okay, perfect. Perfect. That'd be great. Well, look, thanks for your
Awesome.
time, Prof. You have a good rest of your night. I'll be in touch. This was great. Thank you so much. And I look forward to getting together sometime in the future here for another one. Thank you much.
All right. Thank you, Ted. Good night.
You too. Bye-bye.